On March 23rd, 2020, Valve released a little game called Half-Life Alyx. This game was poised to set a new standard for VR games going forward, with the best Half-Life story to date and a level of visual and mechanical polish that only Valve could achieve. I started playing the game just minutes after launch, and it was just as glorious as I was hoping it would be. So good, in fact, that I threw all my non-work obligations out the window for the next week. 3 days later, at about 6:30 p.m., I had just finished Chapter 6. I took off my headset, got myself a sandwich, watched some TV, and called it a night. Then 2 hours later, something crossed my mind. I thought, hey, I don't go to work tomorrow. Why not play through the next chapter so that tomorrow I can just finish the game? This was my first mistake. You see, at 9 o'clock, I was excited to see what Valve had up its sleeve, but what I didn't know at the time was Valve's sleeves were filled with nothing but LSD and bootleg copies of John Krasinski's A Quiet Place, and that by 10 o'clock, I would be a sweaty, scared little man curled up in a ball of anxiety with a broken touch controller. This is Chapter 7 of Half-Life Alyx, Jeff, and how it ended up costing me more than the game itself. The chapter starts like any other chapter in Half-Life Alyx, with you, Alyx Vance, making your way through a small Zen-infested room. But this time, something's different. Alyx mentions that the room is filled with old bottles and asks Russell if the alcohol goes bad. He tries telling Alyx that it only gets better over time, but the signal starts breaking, and he gets cut off. Up to this point in the game, Russell has been in near constant communication with Alyx, keeping her company through the many unsettling sights within City 17. But Valve chooses to set the tone of the chapter immediately by starting to disconnect Alyx from her only lifeline. Alyx walks into the next room and sees the remains of an old distillery, with dead Combine workers in hazmat suits covered in what I've affectionately called Zen goo. And as she leaves the room, Zen spores on the side of the hallway start spitting out a gas which, when inhaled, make her start coughing. The only way to stop the coughing is to cover your mouth with one of your hands, leaving you one-handed anytime you're near one. You scavenge for ammo and resin around the bar, and as you make your way outside, you see what is probably the most gorgeous thing you've ever seen in this game, the sunset over City 17. In retrospect, this is like walking through a tulip field on a sunny spring morning, moments before getting stabbed by Satan. Eventually, you hear someone grunting, mumbling, "There are better ways to die than this." They turn out to be this lovely guy with a headcrab-proof helmet named Larry, being pulled up by a barnacle. Once you shoot the barnacle and rescue him, you hear a booming roar and Larry says this, quote,
"Oh, that's Jeff."
Jeff?
Oh, don't worry. He can't see. Here's just fine, though. Got an ear like Mozart.
Who?
You follow Larry to an elevated walkway, almost completely broken except for a few little pieces still connected to a wall, and as you look down, you see it. You see Jeff. Larry drops a bottle from above you down to the lowest level, and Jeff runs to the precise location where the bottle was and roars at it. This is where the fun begins. You slowly make your way through the distillery's booze-filled maze until you end up here, a small room with a dead guy and some bottles. The only way out is through this little garage door, but uh-oh, it's all gunked up. Now all you have to do is pick the door up, quickly run away and hide, because this is your first encounter with him. This right here is Jeff. Jeff is blind. Jeff looks like what would happen if a Demogorgon and Timothée Chalamet had a baby. Jeff is a Combine worker that was mutated by the Zen goop I mentioned earlier, and as such has essentially turned into a Venus flytrap with legs and serious anger issues. As you can see, his face is completely cut in half, so to make up for the lack of functioning eyes, he developed an incredible sense of hearing, so he could use echolocation to make his way around. His shoulders and back are covered with flora that constantly emit toxic spores around him, meaning the only way to get near him safely is to keep your mouth covered. If you cough, you're dead. Along with those spores, he also has highly acidic vomit, which he uses to quickly reduce anything he deems a threat into a teensy tiny little puddle. Lastly, he's incredibly strong. So strong that no matter how much you shoot him, he will not die. His only weakness? The vertical plane. He literally cannot climb ladders. This is never really explained, but my personal headcanon is that his right arm is just so big that he can't squeeze it into the confines of a ladder, which I find way funnier than I should. Now that everyone knows the mechanics, let's get into my actual experience with the chapter. The first time I was face to face with Jeff, I froze. I dropped to the ground, stunned. It took me a solid 10 tries to realize you had to climb the crates in the hall to enter the next room. The challenge in this room is clear. There's a crank in the middle of the room attached to a door that is incredibly loud when spinning because of course it is. I spent a good 15 minutes in this room before I got the door open, half because I didn't want to move too loud and get eaten, and half because it didn't come to mind that I could just throw a bottle in here and trap him inside. I got it figured out, and with Jeff banging on the door of the locked room, I walked out, pressed the elevator button on the wall, and the lights went out, and the elevator door wouldn't open. But now, there's a wire to follow. With my flashlight on, I started following the wire out of the room and down the hall, when suddenly, I realized what had to happen. The wires led back down the hallway and disappeared into the room I'd locked Jeff in, just minutes earlier. I had to go back in. I had to free Jeff. So, after a few minutes of cursing the name of Valve for making me do this, with the tiniest little tap, I unlatched the door and Jeff came roaring out, making me jump so hard that I scared my cat into leaving the room. As soon as I collected myself, I followed the wire, unwittingly triggered an alarm, died, did it again without tripping the wire, and went on my merry way to the elevator. For a second, I thought I was actually done. I felt safe. So I went in, got the electricity turned on, and of course Jeff heard and followed me in. You see, Valve, and their never-ending quest to make me hate them, forced me to get right next to Jeff and press a button. Because of my fear, my hands were so shaky that in this part I died 3 times because I was practically smacking Jeff on my way to the button. I only got it under control once I clutched the controller with all my strength to hold it still. From this point forward, any time that I wasn't opening my hand to grab something, my right touch controller was being absolutely crushed in an attempt to keep steady. My grip button didn't stand a chance.
Alyx, coming in. Hey, Alyx. Oh, there you are. Can you hear me?
I tried playing Pavlov with one of my friends a few weeks ago, and the hilarious result of that face-off with Jeff is now every time I move my hand near my waist, my controller grip sinks in and immediately makes me drop whatever it's near. Since I'm right-handed, it was always my gun. I entered so many fights shouting, "Where did my gun go?" only to find it on the floor 3 rooms away. Even still, it's hard to stay mad at Valve. This level is one I will never forget and stands out as some of the most intense and fun survival horror I have ever seen. VR allowed Valve to take what I could laugh at in The Last of Us and turn it into something so terrifying that it managed to surge through me and break a $70 controller. So to Valve, thank you. And if you're seeing this, please send me an index. My Rift is literally broken because of you. Okay. Love you. Bye.